So there was a big story that broke late last week about General Michael Flynn, who was a top Trump official, of course, and then he was fired. He pled guilty to Robert Mueller and is willing to talk to get a deal. So this just absolutely blew up online. Social media was on fire over it. And this is, I think, a big story. Now, yet again, everybody's framing it as a continued part of the Russiagate story. But you're about to see how it pretty clearly is not that. It's Robert Mueller effectively going after Trump and his administration for corruption. Now, they recently did this with Manafort. They were able to get him. He's a pretty openly corrupt scumbag, willing to take money from whoever and do their bidding in the government. He had proven ties to pro-Russia elements in Ukraine. He was more than willing to do their bidding. Now, with Flynn, I actually thought the first announcement when Mueller got Manafort, I thought that was going to be Mueller saying, we got Flynn, because Flynn, there is just a plethora of evidence that he's probably the most corrupt of the people in the Trump administration who are all part of this fiasco. Well, now it looks like they got Flynn, and they flipped Flynn, and it's going to be interesting to see what he has to say and who he's giving up to try to protect his own ass. So this is getting really interesting. Now, let me give you the specifics of this case, and you'll see why this isn't just a Russia story. This is much bigger than that. So this is from BuzzFeed News. They say it was Kushner who told Flynn to make calls about Israel UN vote, source says. That's interesting. The president's son-in-law prompted the December 22nd, 2016 call to Russia's ambassador that is the focus of Flynn's guilty plea Friday. Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, called Michael Flynn in December 2016 and told him to call members of the UN Security Council in an effort to stop a vote on a resolution critical of Israeli settlement policy, according to a person who was present in the room when Flynn took the call. Flynn then called Russia's then ambassador to the United States to seek his assistance, and later lied to the FBI about having done so, according to documents filed in federal court Friday by special counsel Robert Mueller that explained Flynn's guilty plea of lying to federal agents. Okay, so this didn't happen. Originally, they said, well, this was when Trump was a candidate. Turns out there was misreporting. This didn't happen when Trump was a candidate. This happened when Trump was President-elect Trump. So in other words, there's no crime whatsoever when you have an administration that's incoming being in contact with world officials, wherever they may be, in whatever country they may be a part of. And the crime wasn't that. The crime was apparently that Flynn lied about making those phone calls after the fact. So really the cover-up is the actual crime here. But let me continue and give you more information because there's more stuff that I think is very telling. According to the charge sheet, Flynn, on December 22nd, 2016, asked Kislyak to use Moscow's status as a permanent Security Council member to delay or defeat the pending resolution, and subsequently lied about those discussions with the FBI. It's unclear why Flynn would have lied, but there are laws that could criminalize such behavior such as the Logan Act, a scarcely enforced law that prohibits unauthorized citizens from negotiating with foreign governments that have a dispute with the United States. In the run-up to the vote, both Flynn and Kushner called several officials of Security Council member states in order to block or delay the resolution. Flynn personally called foreign ambassadors on the Security Council, including representatives of Uruguay and Malaysia. Okay, so the issue in question here is a UN resolution, non-binding UN resolution, that condemns Israel for their illegal settlements. So Flynn, at the behest of Kushner, calls all these different governments at the UN and says, listen, I want you to vote this way on this. For Russia, they said, we want you to come out on the side of Israel. We don't want you to condemn their illegal settlements. Now, by the way, Russia didn't do that. Russia said, we are going to condemn Israel's illegal settlements. So they didn't do it. But they were calling not just Russia, a bunch of different governments to say that. And again, the issue they were doing it over was Israel. Now, you get the sense when you listen to everything in mainstream media about this, that they frame this as solely a Russia scandal. But this isn't Kushner telling Flynn to call other countries at the UN to try to get them to vote a certain way on Russia sanctions, for example. This has nothing to do with Russia policy-wise. It has to do with Israel. So it's not that Flynn and the Trump administration are doing the bidding of Russia, which again is what all the coverage implies on this. It's that they're doing the bidding of Israel. But it really is genuinely astonishing how whenever somebody's our ally, full pass. Full 100% pass. We're not even going to talk about that angle of the story. You know, a point I've made repeatedly in the midst of this Russia hysteria is, well, you want to talk about collusion and you want to talk about corruption. How about the fact that Donald Trump opened up about 8 new businesses in Saudi Arabia while he was campaigning to become president? Trump, when he became president, Saudi Arabia paid his hotels $270,000 for stays at the hotel that cost nowhere near $270,000. You want to know why they're giving him that much money? Because it's fucking pay-to-play corruption. And then lo and behold, Donald Trump approves a weapons deal that's worth $110 billion to Saudi Arabia. So you want to talk about collusion, you want to talk about corruption. How about the fact that he's 100% sold out to Saudi Arabia? And we know, as a matter of fact, that when he was campaigning, he blamed them for 9/11. He said repeatedly, I think it's their fault. Then why'd you just give them over $100 billion weapons deal? Could it be because you have 8 new businesses registered there? Could it be because you just took $270,000 from them at your hotel and they're paying you to do favors for them? But nobody says there's a Saudi Arabia scandal going on now. Nobody says there's an Israel scandal going on now. When the administration says Jared Kushner tells Flynn, don't let them criticize Israeli settlements. Now, let me ask you a question. Why would Kushner do that? It's almost like he has an open line of communication to Netanyahu or somebody in a top position in the Israeli government, and they told Kushner, hey, go try to block the UN from doing this. It's almost like that's exactly what happened. But nobody is saying, hey, we need more evidence on that. We need to dig deeper into that. They're all framing it from the Russia angle. How can you frame it from the Russia angle when they asked multiple countries? Russia was just one of the countries, and Russia didn't even vote the way you wanted them to vote. How can this be framed as a Russia scandal? It makes no fucking sense. Now, imagine for a second the story was flipped, and it was they were trying to get the UN to do something in terms of Russia policy. Well, then everybody would be saying, that's it. We got to find the recording of the phone call that Kushner had with the top Russian government official, because this is the collusion that we're talking about from the highest levels. They're doing the bidding of the Russian government. But when that's the case with the Israeli government, fucking crickets, nothing. Now, by the way, let me be clear about something. The reality of the situation is, this isn't when they were campaigning. This is when they were... this is when it was the incoming administration. This was President-elect Trump and his administration. So in other words, what that means is, whether or not I like it, none of this stuff is really illegal. You know, we might not like that the incoming administration is already kind of getting involved in the international political scene, or even if they were already getting involved like directly in the national political scene. We might not like it. And I might despise the fact that they are seemingly doing Israel's bidding directly and trying to influence other countries in that direction. But I don't think there's a crime there. You know, I don't. I just think it's fucking gross and fucked up. Now, where there are crimes, for sure, it's already been proven that Michael Flynn, and this is likely the reason why he flipped, not just because of this, because I'm sure they held this over his head, like, why'd you lie to us about having connections with other countries as you're the incoming administration? Why'd you lie to us about making phone calls to people at the UN? So they're going to hold that over his head. But also, it's been proven Michael Flynn took over $500,000 from the government of Turkey. And in return for that, what did he do? He pressured the administration, he pressured Donald Trump to snub the Kurds and not arm the Kurds and not back the Kurds from taking back cities that were held by ISIS. So do you understand that? That's very important. In other words, everybody in the administration, by the way, Democrat and Republican, seemingly agreed, okay, our number one ally in the region is the Kurds. We know they're not jihadists. They're fighting against jihadists. And this is why we've given them humanitarian aid. We've armed them in certain circumstances. And we back them fighting ISIS. Well, guess what? Turkey despises the Kurds. They always have. They always have, because there's a separatist Kurdish movement in Turkey. So they view the Kurds as terrorists. So we're allies with Turkey. Turkey always hated that we were backing the Kurds in the fight against ISIS. They despise it. So what would you do if you're Turkey in that circumstance? I don't know. Let me pay somebody from the incoming government $500,000 or more and get him to pressure people in the administration. Mr. I'm a general, so you got to take my word seriously on military affairs. He gets in there, he pressures Donald Trump and other people in the administration. We're not going to arm the Kurds. I think it's a bad idea. Really? Why do you think it's a bad idea? They're fighting ISIS. New phone, who dis? I don't know, but don't arm the Kurds. Well, lo and behold, you trace it back. He took over $500,000 from the Turkish government. So, by the way, that's this kind of thing that people are afraid of with Russia and that everybody's talking about with Russia. Like, oh my God, Russia's buying influence in the government. The only difference is there's no evidence there yet that there's a direct line from the Russian government, to the Trump administration, and they're doing the bidding. There's a chance that is the case with Flynn, because he's obviously totally corrupt and willing to do shit like that. He already did it. But in the case of Turkey, the evidence is already there that he 100% did the bidding of the Turkish government and pushed them in a direction policy-wise. And in the case of Turkey, it's particularly egregious. In the case of Israel, it's bad. But in the case of Israel, we have no evidence of the Israeli government giving money to Jared Kushner or to Michael Flynn to do their bidding. As far as we know, it was just phone calls and they say, hey, do this for us, and then they do it. But when you have a quid pro quo and he's taking money from the Turkish government, then guilty. We got him. And by the way, there's another story that it wasn't just that they gave him over $500,000 to try to push the administration to not arm the Kurds. It's also, I just learned about this the other week. They wanted him to kidnap a Turkish preacher who now lives in America, Gulen. Remember when there was the attempted coup in Turkey? Well, Erdogan blamed that on a guy named Gulen, and that guy lives in the U.S. He thinks that, this guy was trying to overthrow me and he would become the leader of Turkey. Whether or not that's true or not, I genuinely don't know. But they wanted Michael Flynn to kidnap this guy in the middle of the night in the U.S. and send him to Turkey, again, for a tremendous amount of money. So they know that stuff about Flynn. They could hold that over Flynn's head and say, listen, son, you're going to jail for a really long time. And so when you put Flynn in a corner like that, he's like, okay, I'll give you whoever you want for whatever reason you want. And it looks like what he's doing is he's giving up Kushner. And what he's saying is, I was ordered by Kushner to contact Russia, to contact Uruguay, to contact Malaysia, to contact other people at the UN, other countries at the UN, and to try to get them to go against the resolution condemning Israel for the illegal settlements. And again, the crime in that respect is not that the new administration is contacting people from other countries, leaders of other countries. That's not the crime in that part. The crime is that they tried to cover it up, and he didn't tell the FBI about it. If he was just open up front about it and said, yeah, when we were the incoming administration, we made the phone calls. That might be, not cool, but that's not something that's a crime. It's a crime when you tried to cover it up and you weren't truthful with the FBI after the fact. So the cover-up is worse than the crime in that respect. But there are other crimes that they have him on that are way worse, which are what I just described, the Turkey situation for one. And let me be crystal clear about something, and I've maintained this all along. If you want to frame the Russia narrative as Donald Trump and his administration are incredibly corrupt and they're willing to do the bidding of foreign governments, yes, as has been proven. But specifically in the case of Donald Trump, there's evidence of him, having mafia connections. True. There's evidence of him doing the bidding of Russian oligarchs. True. The one aspect of the Russia narrative that I think isn't true, because there's no evidence of it, is that Donald Trump is committing treason. And he's Putin's puppet, is another way they phrase it. Because here's the reality of it. He hasn't done the bidding of the Russian government policy-wise in any respect. In fact, he's done the opposite. There's been so much pressure on him over this Russia hysteria that across the board, he is, for example, Congress passed an increase in sanctions on Russia. Trump obviously vetoed it, right? Because here's a guy who's Putin's puppet. Wrong. He signed it. So we increased sanctions on Russia. Now people say, oh my God, but he didn't implement those sanctions. That's actually not true. There was a delay in implementing them, but they implemented them. So let's get our facts straight on that. It's not accurate to say, oh, he didn't implement the sanctions. Furthermore, if there was going to be a deal with Russia, obviously right front and center would be the Exxon angle to the deal. There's a multi-trillion-dollar oil deal that Russia had with Exxon. Now, Obama, I think they had approved it, but then they axed it as soon as stuff went to shit with Crimea. Well, guess what? Trump comes in and he picks Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil, to be Secretary of State. So everybody, myself included, goes, fucking, they're gonna do the bidding of the Russian government. They're gonna approve that oil deal. Guess what? They didn't approve the deal. So if the oil deal that's at the heart of the corruption scandal with the Russian government specifically didn't happen, and the sanctions have been increased, and Trump bombed Assad, who's Russia's top ally, you do realize for there to be a deal with the Russian government has to get something out of it, right? So that's why the narrative of specifically talking about the Russian government makes no sense. And there's the added angle of putting all the corruption and everything aside, what are the proper policies to do with Russia? Well, I would argue I don't want to escalate with them further. So I don't want to add more sanctions on top of them. I don't want to bomb the Syrian government. I wouldn't approve the oil deal, but that's a slightly different part of this. But in other words, I would want to de-escalate with them. But now, because of the Russia hysteria, Trump is in a position where even if he does de-escalate with them, then everybody's going to paint him as Putin's puppet even further, and they're going to say, well, that's obvious proof of your sold out to him. So Trump is massively incentivized now to be more hawkish and be more aggressive and escalate further with Russia. So that's what that's the pickle the Democrats are now in. The implication of their arguments that he's such a Putin puppet is that now the only way to prove you're not is to escalate further and increase tensions and move us closer to World War III. Now, again, I do think Trump has deals with foreign governments all over the world. I mean, his products are made in at least 12 different countries. So is he doing favors for those countries because he has personal business dealings with them? Absolutely. And so he's already in violation of the Emoluments Clause. There's no doubt about that. And in terms of Russia, yes, I think he does have ties to oligarchs there, and he's doing their bidding. I just don't think that it goes as far as Putin and doing Putin's bidding, because he hasn't done Putin's bidding. His policies have not helped Putin. So, again, I think this is being misreported as solely a Russia scandal. If anything, it's more of an Israel scandal, because they were trying to get the policy that Israel wanted. But even that I don't think is true, because there's really no violation of the law there. So it's not that aspect of this is not a scandal. The real scandal is, yes, Manafort was massively corrupt. Yes, Flynn is massively corrupt. I don't deny that Flynn in an instant would do, the bidding of any foreign government, as he proved he did with Turkey. So all that is true, but we need to stick to what the facts say. And right now the facts are this is more of a Turkey scandal than a Russia scandal, and it's more of an Israel scandal than a Russia scandal. But again, even on the Israel front, there was no money exchange, there was no direct quid pro quo. So even though they're doing the bidding of the Israeli government, it's not against the law because he was in the incoming administration. It wasn't when he was campaigning, and there was no money changing hands in that respect. So overall, though, I would say I think the Mueller investigation is a good thing. Because even though it all started, it was all birthed in the hysteria of Russia. I covered the story when it was announced that he's working with Preet Bharara, who's the guy who was looking into Trump's corruption in regards to Tom Price. Tom Price is Health and Human Services Secretary, who invested a tremendous amount of his own money into pharma companies and then immediately proposed bills that helped those pharma companies. So that guy's massively corrupt. Preet Bharara was looking into him. Mueller brought on Preet Bharara, and what that showed me is he expanded his investigation from just Russia to, I'm going to look at the entire Trump administration, and I'm going to look at all their corruption. Well, if you look at them for their corruption, well, then I'm 100% with you. And that's it. You know, they were able to get Manafort as a result of this. They definitely got Flynn. Now, Flynn is flipping on Kushner. And yes, you trace this all back, it might eventually get to Trump. Wouldn't be surprising at all. The guy has fucking no morals, and he's a vapid idiot, and he'd be willing to do anybody's bidding for the right price. But I think the mechanics of it are a little different than the Democrats are portraying it as. So it's not really Russia as much as it's corruption. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing that Mueller's taking these guys down. I only wish every administration could have a ruthless investigator that's looking into every nook and cranny of their business dealings, because then we'd have a government that's a lot more responsible if they knew a watchdog was looking after them and ready to prosecute them at any second.